Hi, this is Ben Osborne with Thermoscientific, and this video is just a quick tutorial for people who are very familiar with Excalibur for operating an LTQ or an LTQ orbitrap, and this is just an introduction to the differences in the Q Exactive. So this is just a quick run through to familiarize you with some of the differences that you'll see, and maybe the changes in nomenclature and that kind of thing. So the first thing you'll notice is that I am not actually on a computer that is connected to a Q Exactive. I'm just running a disconnected version of Excalibur with Q Exactive configured within Excalibur. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that this is very, very different than what we're used to looking at with the LTQ setups. The operations here tend to be very drag and drop. So you pick a scan mode and you simply pull it over. Now, because the Q Exactive is also designed with small molecule metabolomics in mind, you'll notice that we can break the time bar here into separate segments. Now, for your general proteomics experiment, where we're going to use the same tune file all the way through, you're not going to need to break these into multiple segments here. So one of the most common pitfalls here is that you have two places, global and general runtime, where you can put in the duration of the experiment. One of the most common pitfalls here is that the gradients don't match here and here. I, in fact, still fall for this one, and once in a while I'll just have a run that doesn't acquire the whole time because I forgot to enter the runtime of my gradient in both places. So that's the first thing. But backing up, I just want to pull up to the top here. Now, we have control here over these global lists, and this is where you'll put in your global lock mass, where you can just pull in and put in, say, if we wanted to use polysiloxane, we can simply put that in. We can put in a start and an end time if we only want to lock mass for a certain amount of time, but in general, let's just, if it's here and there's no start or stop time, it'll monitor that all the way through. If it does not see this ion, it doesn't care. It's just going to go with the last calibration, the last time it saw it. And like the Orbitrap Elite, adding a lock mass adds no extra time to your measurements. You're not slowing down the instrument or increasing your cycle time. Just put that in here. You can save that. You can you can save anything under global here and import export. But in most cases, just save it into the method here. The next global is your inclusion list, and this is where you would put in ions that you're specifically interested in. If you're going to be doing some sort of monitoring you want to specifically follow a set of known M per Z's, you can put these in. You can follow them for a specific start and stop time. If you're doing, say, an experiment where you want to also fragment these, and you can put in specific collision energies for these ions when they're found. You can set it so that even if the mass matches within 10 ppm, which is the default for any mass put into the Q Exactive, it's going to default to a 10 ppm window. But if you wanted to say, okay, well, within 10 ppm, I'm only interested in this ion if it is a +3 charge, you can do that. You can narrow things down so you're not fragmenting the wrong ions. In Proteome Discover 1.4, when you export an exclusion or an inclusion list, you have the options of exporting them in Q Exactive format, which means that they will come out in this format. They'll add the rope for positive or for your polarity. They'll have your time. You can put in your collision energy and your charge state if you want, and just directly import those in. You would do that by just importing here. You can also save this list. If you have a global list that you're always interested in, you can add those. Unlike in the case of the hybrid instruments, where you have an option of fragmenting the most intense ions if none are found in your inclusion list. This feature is not actually present in the Q Exactive at this point in time. It's take it or leave it. It's either fragment everything that is on your inclusion list, or do a general discovery experiment. There is no way of if I didn't see anything on my list, go ahead and fragment the 10 most intense ions. The only way of working around that is if, for say, you knew that this ion was going to elute between 24.5 and 25.5 minutes. Then the rest of the time, then your general method will work as it normally would. But for this minute, you won't fragment anything else except for what is on your inclusion list. Let's see. The next thing, of course, would be the exclusion list. A big upgrade from the hybrid instruments is that here you can put in up to 5,000 ions to exclude at any given point in time. And again, in Discoverer, you can 1.4, you can export these in exactly this format, up to 5,000 of them, where the upper limit for the hybrids is 2,000. You can run your plasma through the Q Exactive one time, make your list of all of your high-end, your IgGs, your transferrins, your albumins, and all those peptides in their +2 and +3 states, and so on. And you can add those here, exclude them all, and run again and actually dig down deep and start to see stuff in your plasma that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. You can also list them by charge state. You can also set neutral loss masses for in case you are using the neutral loss method that the Q Exactive comes equipped with. You can also use tags if you know that you have a known mass shift because you tag some of your peptides, say with Silac or whatever. You can specifically go after those. In the tune files, you have the advantage of, if you need it, of being able to add in multiple tune files in Q Exactive. Say if I want to change my switch count to 1, now I get a place where I can put in a tune file for a certain number of minutes. Say right here, I can run one tune file, and for the next part of the gradient I can run a second tune file. In most proteomics applications, we're not really, this isn't something we're really interested in, but it's a capability that's here. There were some papers a while back where they were using triple quad instruments to do positive and negative on phosphos, and I don't know, that's something that may come back, and this would be a way to do that, where you could have positive and negative tune files, or multiple runs. But that feature is here. Under external hardware, you can add other divert valves. A lot of small molecule people do this, where we'll have multiple valves because we have multiple columns to separate multiple analytes, and you can control all those here. You can also use the chromatography function. You can get a good look at. Let me minimize the rest of these. In case you wanted to open another file and look at what your chromatography looked like on your last run, and then you want to shape your parameters based off of that, you can open this here. But these are pretty much your global settings, and again, everything defaults to about 10 ppm. Now, if you were just doing an MS1 survey scan, this is where you would do this. You would simply pull over the full MS or SIM. You would set your time. Clicking on the whatever is here on the bar will give you more of the features. And something, if you want to unhide some stuff, let's search here. Show all properties. So Say yes, show all properties. Hit true. This will give you a little more control over what the QE is doing. And see here I'm running this full MS from 0 to 180 minutes. No in-source CID, in positive mode. I'm doing 1 microscan at 70,000 resolution. The QE goes from 17.5 to 140 in resolution. You can here in your method you can change your AGC target, you can change your injection time, you can change the number of scan ranges you're using, and you can change the specific scan range. The most common experiment, I think, for us proteomics people will be the data-dependent MS2. In order to get rid of one of these, you simply right-click on it and say delete this. Again, this is probably the most common thing that we're going to be doing, where we're doing a full MS1 scan followed by data-dependent MS2. So if something meets our threshold criteria cutoff, it'll go ahead and we'll select those for fragmentations. This is our top-end method. Great, and for this experiment, the defaults are all going to be set up pretty good. It's worth keeping in mind, however, if you do delete an experiment and add a new one, the run times immediately change. So I'm assuming that I'm running a full 180-minute gradient in positive. No in-source CID. Default charge state's nice because this is normalized collision energy, so the default charge state really does mean something here. Leave it at 2 for trypsin, tryptic digestions, and if you're doing lyse C, you might want to move it up to 3 or 4. Bigger enzymes, you want a bigger charge state. If you are using an inclusion or exclusion list or tags, you can add them here, but in a general discovery experiment, we're not going to. Microscans, so that really is, there's nothing micro about this. This is, if you have 3 microscans, it's going to do 3 MS1 scans at 70,000, which take up quite a bit of time, and it's going to do those and then average that into 1 MS1 scan. There really isn't, in a discovery experiment, there's really no reason to do this. 70,000, as fast as the QE is, you might as well get that high resolution MS1 scan. The AGC target, 3E6, on an MS1 scan, you're going to hit that almost immediately. I can't really, this is probably a pretty good default. Changing things like dropping it to a lower level or raising it, in a full proteomics experiment, it's probably not going to have very much of a a very big difference. So 3E6 is a nice place to be. It's going to hit that quickly, and it's going to allow you to look pretty deep into the into your data. Maximum injection time here on the MS1 level, you're going to be hitting this target, and at most 10 milliseconds. So you can crank this down to make sure that you do get in more MS1 scans. But again, a pretty good default for scan range. Since I work almost completely with trypsin, I'm not going to be interested in anything below 400. I'm really not going to be interested in anything above 1600 M over Z. So that's where I would, this is the default that I would use. Okay, now we're down to the data-dependent scans, and this is where there's some newer things here. Resolution, the lowest resolution, fastest scan rate you can use is 17.5. AGC target, 1E5. That's going to give you a nice fragmentation pattern. You've got 100,000 ions in there. That's going to fragment well. I may even lower it a little bit. I feel like I'm going to get a good MS spectra in most cases at 5E4. 50 milliseconds to gather that is probably just fine. I personally move this to 30. I don't, if I'm on the far end of that peak, and and that peptide's pretty much eluted. Its intensity is much lower now because we're just past it. I don't want it to spend 50 milliseconds sitting around trying to figure out, spending all of its time filling to get a fragmentation on something that just might not be very intense. If it doesn't fill up in 30 milliseconds, in a discovery scan, let's just skip it. Now loop count is part of the new nomenclature here. As long as your multiplex count, your MSX count, is 1, your loop count is equal to your top n. Now, given the speed of the Q Exactive, unless you're doing a very compressed UPLC gradient, there's really no reason, in my opinion, to ever use anything less than a top 15 experiment here. It's just fast enough that you're going to get, even if your peak is only 30 seconds wide, with the speed of the QE, you are going to get your 12, 13 MS1 scans across your curve, even if you were getting 15 MS2 events in between each one of those MS1s. In this case, I was using a 100-minute gradient, which is a little bit longer, and I'm going to leave this at a top 20. Now the multiplex count, until there is software available for translating multiplexed fragmentation data, multiplexing in your general proteomics experiment isn't really going to help you much. This allows, in multiplexing, the C-trap fills up with multiple ions of interest. And in this experiment, what would happen is you would, if I multiplex 2, the first top two most intense ions would be filtered through the quadrupole and collected in the trap, the first one and then the second one sequentially. Then those ions would be shot through the HCD, fragmented, and then read in the Orbi. So then I would get all the fragmentation of those 2 ions. But as of yet, to my knowledge, there is no way of translating that data for a shotgun proteomics experiment, though multiple groups are working on it. I would expect that to be soon. But here, let's just leave that at 1. Isolation window of 4, yeah, that'll be just fine. You can cut it down to 3 without losing very much sensitivity, but 4 would be just fine. If you're doing iTrack or TMT, this is where you'd want to make sure you had a fixed first mass. Your iTrack labels are going to be around 116, your TMT labels in the 120, 130 range. So you definitely want to make sure that every MS starts low enough that you see your reporter ions. NCE, this is our normalized collision energy. On the QE, it's worth noting that the HCD cell is really the newest and most advanced HCD collision cell that we have ever produced, and it's really efficient. On most instruments that I've worked with, I see really good fragmentation between 26 and 28. There's still a little bit of variability for individual machines and the exact pressure of the gas coming in, but in general, I like to start at 26, 27, 28. 30 is going to hit your ions just a little too hard in every example that I've seen. Stepped collision energy, normalized collision energy, is for those ions where you're not exactly sure where it's going to fragment. Well, imagine in this example, let's see, I'm going to put a 10%. If I put a 10% stepped normalized collision energy, it will assume that our medium step, our middle step, is this NCE of 26. The first step will occur at 10% less than 26, so roughly 23, and then the third step will occur at 10% above 26. So essentially, you'll collect the ion 3 times, and the first time the ion is collected, it will be fragmented at 23. Those fragment ions will be collected. Then we'll fragment the ion at 26, collect those ions, fragment the ion at 29, collect those ions, and then we'll read all the fragmentations in the orbitrap altogether. But most peptides are going to fragment, at the within the same range, and for most peptides, you're not going to gain much here. Now, the underfill ratio is our minimum cutoff for performing an MS-MS event. So these are pretty good defaults. My AGC target here and my injection time both affect my intensity threshold, as does my underfill ratio. So if I change this to, say, 2.0 as my underfill, then my intensity threshold, so this is the threshold that you have to meet in order to perform an MS-MS event. In general, these are pretty good defaults. If I have 1.7 E4 ions, that's going to give me a pretty good fragmentation spectra. And so really between this and the AGC target, this determines the intensity of your MS-MS spectra. And the parent going in is going to be between 1.7 E4 and 5 E4. So this is a nice range. I think you're going to get pretty good fragmentation spectra from this, depending on how much you load and how many fractionation steps there are for your sample. Changing these settings might allow you to dig a little deeper, or upping this, increasing this threshold might allow you to fragment less noise that you have in your background. But in general, this is something that requires a little bit of experimentation to optimize, but these defaults are all pretty good. Apex triggering is on the LTQ and hybrid instruments. This is the chromatography function, and this has been improved and simplified with the attempt to allow you to perform your fragmentation of your ions near the apex of the peak. And so what ends up happening is the first time an ion is selected for an MS-MS event, that ion is continually monitored for an increase or decrease in sensitivity. If you set a minimum at say 3, and this is basically seconds, so this is your 3 to 8 seconds. Your next fragmentation event is going to occur somewhere between 3 and 8 seconds following your initial fragmentation event. So it'll occur in 3 seconds if the slope of the curve of the increase in intensity is such that it has either approached the apex or exceeded the apex. So if it looks like we did another measurement, assuming we're doing an MS1 scan every second, 1 second later we find an increase, but it's not a really steep increase, and a second later we find another steep increase, but 3 seconds later we see that we're starting to decrease, then this peptide may have just exceeded its apex. It's going to select that for fragmentation. The upper number, this 8 seconds, is worst case scenario. If we cannot see the decrease in sensitivity, can't plot it because of all the noise and everything and how complex this sample is, it's just going to wait 8 seconds and fragment that again. We're going to assume that the intensity threshold cutoff will allow us to see the first MS1 event at the very beginning of the curve, and 8 seconds later, that's going to be later in, it's going to be more intense. So this is kind of your worst case scenario. Charge exclusion here is also upgraded from the LTQ and hybrid instruments. As always, we can say, if we can't assign the charge, don't fragment it. In most cases, we don't want to fragment our +1s. But unlike the hybrids, where we can say, we can only say up to 4, exclude those, then we have the ability to control up through 8. What I normally do is ignore anything above 7. This is because, as of the most recent iterations of Mascot simply cannot fragment or cannot sequence anything with a +8 charge, a +8 or more charge, and so why collect those if you're using Mascot? Other search engines also have deficiencies here in this area due to the how the algorithms are written, but newer engines may allow us to do a better job of fragmenting these larger ions. Peptide match this is MIPS, monoisotopic precursor selection. If you're doing a discovery experiment, leave this on preferred. What that's going to do is allow you to not spend your time fragmenting your ion of interest plus that ion of interest with 1 C13, 2 C13, 3 C13s. Don't waste all your time fragmenting the same ion over and over again just because you've found the isotopes of that. So leave peptide match on, exclude isotopes on as well, and your dynamic exclusion, just one setting here. I'd like to set that at half peak width. 180 minute gradient. I know on my column that's going to be about 45 second peak width, so I set this at 20 seconds for dynamic exclusion, and it'll try to do the apex triggering, but and if not, then it'll wait 20 seconds to do the dynamic exclusion. Apex triggering should supersede dynamic exclusion, but this is setting here. So if I was really wanted to use just the dynamic exclusion settings, I just set these to 0 and 0 and turn them off. So for just a quick introduction to how to set up a top an experiment in a Q Exactive when you're familiar with the LTQ format, that's pretty much all I have for you. There are obviously other features, but I don't want to make this video all that long. But if you have any questions, I strongly suggest that you check Planet Orbitrap or the BRIMS Thermo portal. And yeah, good luck.